Birmingham, and today I will be presenting my paper on Small Boats, Big Impacts, the Ripple Effects of Irregular Migration, a paper that I'm co-authoring with my supervisor, Dr. Purav Bhatia. We are looking to submit very soon, so any comments and questions are more than welcome. So thank you. Okay, just yeah. So the motivation for this study actually stems from the recent discourse around around irregular migration that we have seen throughout the world, right? Specifically in UK, US, and Europe, we have seen a lot of debates about irregular migration, which have been highly debated as well. In the US, we have seen Trump promising mass deportations. In the UK, we have seen Rishi Sunak promising to stop the boats, and Keir Starmer with his smash the gang speech. However, when we talk about irregular migration, it by itself is a very clandestine and a episodic event. And what I mean by that is it's very hidden, so it's very difficult to measure as it's unfolding. So we don't really know the exact number of irregular migrants that are coming into a country. So existing work on irregular migration has mostly examined themes such as enforcement efforts, smuggling networks, or even humanitarian responses. But real time evidence on how these irregular migrations affect or how these migrations shape people's opinions towards immigration is not very well known. And I think it's important to understand the public attitudes towards these irregular migrants because they can really shape electoral outcomes and really shape the political discourse of a country. So what we do is for in this paper to look at irregular migration, we look at the small boat crossings in the English Channel. Why specifically the small boat crossings across the English Channel? Well, firstly, because these forms of crossings or these forms of irregular migration is highly visually prominent. So that makes them extremely politicized. They receive an disproportionate amount of media attention. And what I mean by disproportionate amount is that um, taking into consideration that these small boat migration form less than 4% of the total net migration in the UK, they are the ones that are usually always highlighted when there are debates about immigration or when people talk about immigration, right? So they are highlighted in the media, and also the media reports daily inflated numbers of these small boat migrant arrivals. So today this paper will seek to answer the question: how do these highly visible episodes of irregular migration influence public opinions about immigration? So what we do in this paper is we look at a novel high-frequency data set on the daily number of small boat arrivals between 2018 and 2024, and we combine this data set with the British election study, which is a panel data set. So it surveys each respondent over a period of time. So we are really able to capture the changes in the people's attitudes over a period of time between 2018 and 2024. And from this British election survey, we look at we look at the respondents' attitudes towards immigration in general, but also by specific groups of migrants. Specific groups of migrants. We also examine the role of media as a key mechanism through which these irregular migrations become highly politicized. Specifically, we look at media framing and frequency, we look at public attention, and we look at information environment of the respondents. So, what we find in our paper is that irregular migration leads to a significant decline in support for immigration. However, the effect varies depending on the type of migrants that we talk about. So, what we find is that foreign students, non EU migrants, and families of existing migrants face a broader backlash as compared to other groups of migrants. And we also see that media plays a very central role in shaping these public attitudes. Specifically, we see that media coverage increases, specifically for small boat migration with recent arrivals. We see that media exposure amplifies amplifies these attitudes towards irregular migrants, and we also see that the respondents with prior anti-immigration attitudes respond even strongly about they respond even strongly regarding regarding allowing future immigrants to come into the UK. We also see that with recent increase in migrant arrivals, public attention to terms such as small boats and English Channel migrant crossing increases, which also increases the issue salience regarding immigration in the UK. And there's a shift in Parliament in the Parliament discourse as well, where MPs are focusing more on on the issues of irregular migration. So this is a roadmap for today. I'll be talking about data sets, my empirical strategy, results, mechanisms, and policy responses, and then finally moving on to conclusion. So to begin with, the data set for our irregular migration, again, it's the daily number of small boat migrants arriving in the UK from a period of 2018 to 2024. This is a very comprehensive data set. It covers not only the individuals that have been detected at the shore, but also the individuals that have been detected in the middle of crossing and then have been brought ashore. And we see few trends with this data set. Specifically, we see a sharp increase in not only the intensity but also the speed of arrivals after 2020. So we see that not only are there more number of migrants arriving after 2020, but also that these arrivals start earlier in the year and continue on till later in the year as compared to 2020 and before. So there's an increase in intensity as well as speed of arrivals. But when we talk about the mean number of migrants per boat and the standard deviation of migrants per boat, we see both of them increasing, which implies that in the recent years, these small boats have started becoming even more overcrowded, which sort of plays into their visibility as well, because they are so overcrowded. They are at the risk of fatality, and B, also they are more visually prominent. The media is able to report big inflated numbers when it comes to these arrivals. Then we use crossing conditions as our IV. Specifically, we look at h raised to the power of 1/3, which represents the average height of the highest 1/3 of the waves recorded in a given time. So we have hourly data for these crossing conditions, which we aggregate and find out the highest 1/3 of the waves in a day, in a given day. And we do this, and we take the significant wave height at the point of departure of these small boats in Calais, France, which is a very common departure zone for these small boats. The crossing conditions are an indicator of sea roughness and vessel safety. So, usually when the significant wave height is higher, your less boats should come in, less number of boats should come into the UK, because it's quite unsafe to cross during these conditions. Then moving on to public opinion, for our public opinion, we look at the British election study dataset, which again is a panel dataset. So again, a respondent is interviewed over a period of time. So we are able to capture their changing attitudes over a period of time. From this dataset, we look at three main variables. Firstly, we look at the attitudes towards future migrants. Here, the respondents are asked whether they think UK should allow many more migrants to come into the UK, or much fewer migrants to come into the UK. And the respondents are able to rank their preferences on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being that they want many fewer migrants to come into the UK, and 10 being they want many more migrants to come into the UK. So this is for general attitude towards immigration, but we also look at their attitudes towards specific groups of migrants, such as asylum seekers, EU migrants, non-EU migrants, students and families of existing migrants. So it's the same thing. They are able to rank their preferences on a scale of 0 to 10 for each of these migrant groups. Then we also look at issue salience, which is an open-ended question that is asked to the respondents, where they are asked what, according to them, is the single most important issue that faces the country currently. And then the BES codes their responses into 12 main domains, including immigration, economy, Europe, etc. We also look at perceived national conditions, where the respondents are given certain issues and they're asked to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being that they think, sorry, with 1 being that they think that issue in the UK is decreasing, and 5 being that that issue is increasing. We also look at media consumption. So the respondents are asked what newspaper they read, and depending on what newspapers they read, we divide the newspapers into left, right, or other ideology. Then we look at the GDELT data. So the GDELT data monitors global news media in real time. And from the GDEL data, we look at two specific databases. First, we look at the events database. The events database documents all the reported political and social events that have taken place. And it includes metadata on actors, location of the incidents, and also the intensity of interaction. So we retain all the events that have occurred between 2018 and 2024 with the geographic location as UK. And then we compute the daily summaries of these variables. So we use this data set, mainly for two reasons. Firstly, we use them as control variables to control for any daily media variation, to account for any daily media variation. And secondly, we use them as predictors to test whether media activity in the UK affects future migrant arrivals or not. Then we look at global knowledge graph. So the global knowledge graph captures the framing of news articles and it tags these articles on themes and locations. So we retain all the daily entries again from 2018 to 2024 that mention the themes of immigration or migration and include UK as the location. Then we also identify location-specific articles that refer to English channels and the Strait of Dover to isolate only small boat-related news as well. Then coming on to empirical strategy. So this is our empirical strategy. Our main outcome variable Y over here represents the support for allowing more immigrants into the UK by individual I at time T in district D. And our main explanatory variable over here. Oh, sorry. We have also standardized our outcome variable over here. So it measures on a scale of 1 to 5, 0 to 10, and then we standardize it. Our main explanatory variable over here is the cumulative number of migrants arriving in the past 2 days since the date of interview in the British Election Survey, and then we scale it by 1,000. We also include individual fixed effects to account for any individual level respondent characteristics. We also include district and wave fixed effects to account for any spatiotemporal shocks as well. Then we include two kinds of control variables. Firstly, we use individual level control variables, and we also use media control variables again to account for variation in daily media activities as well. And our standard errors are clustered at the survey date level. Then moving on to identification assumptions, our main assumption over here is that recent small boat arrivals are uncorrelated to any other factor that could drive changes in public opinions. And to validate our assumption, we conduct a few validity tests. Firstly, we focus on a narrow 2-day window before each interview. to ensure that we minimize the effects of any confounding variables, but also to isolate the short-run effects from any anticipatory behavior or reverse causality as well. Then we also show that neither does UK news coverage nor do en route migrant fatalities have an effect on future migrant arrivals. And we show that, and we also show a few falsification tests where we show that the perception change is only related to immigration, and changes in other perceptions such as crime, cost of living, economy, NHS, etc. are not really affected. So we are not capturing a broader change in perceptions. We are just capturing a change in perception towards immigration. Um, we also show that attrition from survey and survey completion rates are independent of recent migrant arrivals as well. Then moving on to results. Um, okay, so this is our main baseline result. Here we see that, so over here, our main dependent variable is the support for allowing more migrants to come into the UK on a scale of 0 to 10, which we have then standardized. And our main independent variable is the cumulative number of migrants arriving in the past 2 days since the date of interview, which is then scaled by 1,000. So the way that you would interpret this coefficient is, for every 1,000 migrants arriving in the UK, we see a 0.028 or a 0.027 standard deviation decline in support for allowing more migrants in the UK. In support for allowing more migrants in the UK on a scale of 0 to 10. So it's actually quite a high it's actually quite a high change. So I'm doing okay with time. So here we see that between 2018 and 2024, the average response on whether the UK should allow more immigrants declined by uh, 0.21 points on a 10-point scale. Our estimates suggest that a short-term increase in average small boat arrivals over 2 days leads to a 0.03 point decline, which equals to a single surge explains about 14% of the long-term decline. It's also that, moreover, there's also uncertainty combined with media coverage that affect people's attitudes as well. So that's why we see a much larger increase. We also calculate the persuasion rate to be 7.18, which is quite higher than any of the previous literature that we have seen. Um, yes. Um, then we also wanted to see how these attitudinal changes evolve over time, right? So here we have a event style decomposition of a single regression equation over over a 2 day no over a non-overlapping 2 day time window. So we see that the effect is the strongest and statistically the most significant for the past 2 days of arrivals, and it does decline as we go further down the line. The effect does diminish, as well as the significance reduces. However, when we see this event style decomposition, this is a uh, this is an event style decomposition of separate regression equations with overlapping time windows. So we see that although the effect does diminish when you go from 1 to 8, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, all the way to 1 to 8 time window, however, the effect is statistically quite significant. So this tells us that although a single episode may fade out, but the public opinion continues to reflect recent migration salience over a longer period of time. Um, then moving on to immigration attitudes by category, here we see that there is a stronger backlash, again, as I mentioned, for foreign students, non-EU migrants, and families of existing migrants. There's some backlash for EU migrants as well, but we don't see any significant backlash for asylum seekers. We think that this could be due to sort of a trade-off where people are more accepting of asylum seekers, maybe due to humanitarian reasons, but they might not be as welcoming towards other groups of migrants. Yeah. Then moving on to a few robustness checks. So firstly, we exclude the southeast region of the UK from from our analysis and rerun the analysis actually. So southeast region is where most of these small boat landings take place, and yeah, we just wanted to see whether our results are not driven by this region. So we exclude this region and we rerun our analysis, and our analysis still remains robust. We also use alternative estimators such as migrants per boat and weighted sum. We also show that our results are not driven by shifts in political engagement or media use. And we also use alternative clustering of standard errors by individual survey data as well. We also use our instrument variable, significant wave height, to show that our results remain robust. Results remain robust and are causal as well. We also show that migrant arrivals are similar across the BES survey and non-survey periods, and we rerun our analysis with a completely different data set, the Understanding Society data set, to show that our results are not um, just due to our data set. Okay, so moving on to mechanisms, we actually examined three main mechanisms, including media coverage, public attention, and information environment. But today I will be focusing on media coverage and public attention only. So, to start with media attention, over here, we see that 1,000% increase in migrant arrivals corresponds to a 0.42 log point increase in the overall media coverage. However, this corresponds to around, I think, about 52%, yeah, around 52% increase in the overall media coverage. However, we see that this increase in media coverage is mostly driven by the right-leaning sources of media that show a 0.13 log point increase or a 13.4% increase in media coverage following recent migrant arrivals. We also see uh, moderate increases for left and center-leaning outlets as well. However, when we look at panel B, we see that a recent 1,000% increase in migrant arrivals leads to a 0.18 log point increase in the overall coverage, which corresponds to about 124% increase in the overall migration coverage. But again, we see that most of this media coverage is driven by the right-leaning outlets, which show a 0.24 log point increase or a 27% increase in total media coverage, and the left and center-leaning outlets remain imprecisely estimated. Yeah. So then we move on. So we wanted to see why this is. Why do people reading left, right, or center respond differently? So we look at how these media outlets frame articles related to immigration, right? And here you can see a clear pattern as to how these media outlets report a given news related to migration. So we can see that the right-leaning sources of media are more likely to frame their articles in terms of crime, security, and law enforcement, and less in terms of rights and politics, whereas the left-leaning media outlets are more likely to frame their articles in terms of health, welfare, and environment. So this basically tells us that although the media outlets are reporting on the same news, on the same incidents, the way that they report is quite different, and therefore that could also drive attitudinal changes as well. Moving on to public attention. So here we see that um, recent migrant arrival. So here we wanted to see um, Google's. So here we look at public attention in terms of Google Trends analysis. So we see Google searches for specific immigration related terms such as small boat English Channel migrant crossings, small boats, immigration, refugee, and asylum seekers, and we see that um, following recent migrant arrivals, there's an increase in searches for terms such as English Channel migrant crossings and small boats, whereas broader immigration-related terms such as immigration, refugee, and asylum seeker remain insignificant. So there's an increased public attention towards these specific small boat crossings. Hmm. Then building on that, we also wanted to see how this translates into issue salience, right? So here the respondents are asked what, according to them, is the most important issue that the UK faces currently. And we see that 1,000% increase in recent migrant arrivals leads to a 3.4 percentage point increase in the likelihood that the respondent will answer immigration as the issue that the UK currently faces. And there's also we also capture some concerns for environment as well. So yeah, immigration becomes something that people are really concerned about following recent migrant arrivals. Um, Then there are policy responses as well. It's no secret that the UK government has in the past year has put out a lot of policy responses to curb both legal as well as illegal migrations. So for illegal migrations, they have the most recent deals are one in and one out deal with the France. With France, there's also been digital ID cards to curb illegal migration. But however, the UK government has also put out policies to curb legal migration routes as well. The 2025 immigration white paper is the most talked about and the most debated here in the UK. Um, so this sort of also translates to the results that we see previously, that um, the backlash is not only towards illegal migration routes, but it translates or spills over to legal migration routes as well. So we wanted to see how um, how migrant arrivals translate to sort of a political discourse in the country. So we see that again with a recent 1,000% increase in migrant arrivals, there's a 1 percentage point increase in the probability that the MPs will mention irregular migration in their speech. So, which is given the baseline of 2.4, is almost a 40% increase in the probability um, that the MPs will mention irregular migration in one of their speeches. Um, yes, so to conclude, small boats, big impacts indeed. We see that although small boats form less than 4% of the total of the total net immigration in the UK, they do have much larger impacts here in the UK. Their high visibility and intense media coverage makes these events the center of every policy, every debate. Um, yeah, every policy and every debates. And we also see that the spillover effects extend beyond just irregular migration to backlash regarding support for legal migration routes as well. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanta, for your presentation. Stanislav, you can share your slides and you have 10 minutes to do your discussion.
Yep. Thank you for the presentation. It was great to read your research. I especially love this smart research design. I think it's very clever to combine the timing of the survey with different data sets. That's maybe what I would also use in maybe some of my research. So I really liked that point. And I tried to think about how you can improve your paper. And I guess my main point would be about how you interpret and how you measure the treatment effect sizes. Because currently you look at the treatment effect and treat and interpret that as a 1,000 person increase in the number of arrivals. But if you look at the average number of migrants arriving in the last 2 days, it's 118, and the standard deviation is 239. So that's why if we think about this treatment effect size, as you presented in the paper, it's a 4 standard deviation increase in the shock in the number of migrants. And I guess it's very important also when you compare your results to those of other studies, it's very important to make more comparable treatment effect measure. And for example, first, I guess what you also could do is to show not only the raw number of migrants, what's the distribution of the raw number of migrants, but also since you use so many fixed effects and so many control variables which make your study more robust, you also need to show the residualized number of migrants because
Sorry,
the
show what?
the residualized number of migrants. So once you regress the number of migrants on the fixed effects and multiple controls, and then you take the residualized number of migrants because essentially that's the variation you're exploiting in your research design. So after you take all of that fixed effects and all of these control variables, what you're working with is this left out variation, which is not that high. So it's not going to be 239, it's going to be smaller, but at least we need to realize what's the extent of the variation in your data. Because then it also matters whether you can actually look at the variation and at the 1,000 person increase, or for example, 200 person increase, or you should more frame your results for example, using the standard deviation, because I guess that's the most common way to show the treatment effects. Usually people standardize the treatment outcome and they standardize the outcome. And once you standardize it, it's actually much easier to compare your results also to those of other studies, because usually people report standardized treatments. And yeah, so if I were to do this study, I would do this as a standard deviation increase as opposed to a 1,000 person increase. Because also when you talk about some of the effect sizes being large, it's not very clear whether it's because of the scaling of the variable or whether you actually have such variation in your analysis. Second, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. You have a big appendix. Maybe I've skipped it, but I would also try to look at the treatment as had you had any boats in the last 2 days, because that also can affect your attitudes, not necessarily the number of migrants that have arrived, or whether there have been any arrivals in the last 2 days before I answer this survey, because that also can be a very interesting treatment shock. Not necessarily if 10 migrants arrived or 1,000 migrants arrived, but whether we had any boats in the last 2 days. Also, a different treatment, I thought maybe to look at extraordinary spikes. For example, if in the last 2 days you had 4,000 migrants arriving, that might affect my attitudes much more if, for example, one boat with 20 migrants have arrived. So maybe I would try to look for non-linearities. Maybe it's not necessarily smaller boats that attract my attention, but it's a much larger number of boats or much larger number of people who arrive on them. So there is definitely a possibility to exploit different non-linearities. And yeah, heterogeneity. So without looking at heterogeneity, I expected the effects would be larger for asylum seekers, that people would have changed their results towards asylum seekers. But you don't find any effects on that. And I guess I would try to develop this part because I guess many people, or at least I, expected the results to be more negative for asylum seekers and then for the other groups a bit less. But it's the other way around. So maybe you could provide some theory, or there is a ceiling effect. Maybe the attitudes towards asylum seekers are already so low in your sample that they cannot even go any lower. So I would try to a bit develop that part because heterogeneity I definitely did not expect it. Yeah, then your total effect, you look at it's 0.027 standard deviation. But when I look at the heterogeneity, they are 5 to 7 times larger. And I guess that's because you look at a smaller sample of your respondents. And what I would do, I would report also the main effects for this smaller sample. So I would like to compare what's the main effect using this smaller subset of respondents for whom you observe the responses for these other categories. And then you can compare them because currently they're 5 to 7 times larger. And yeah, for me, it wasn't clear why there's so big difference. Is it because now you have a different set of people or a different set of years? So it wasn't clear to me why there's so big differences. You've done many, many placebos, so I'm just throwing more and more. What I would do also, I would try to change the date of arrival. So I would try to randomly assign the day of arrival to a respondent and then re-estimate your model. And then you would you could do it within a wave, you could do it within a month, and then you would try to see whether your result changed or whether you find any significant effects on this random day of arrivals, just to get rid of some seasonality and get rid of some yearly changes. And maybe I'd also try to see whether your results are sensitive if you drop waves, for example, where Rwanda plan was announced or where other plans regarding the immigration have been announced, because that's maybe what drives people's attitudes towards migrants, that these major political announcements have been made during this time when I was interviewed and not necessarily the smaller boats announcement. So I would try to separate these two events. And also, since you have a panel data, I would definitely try to compare or try to look at the attitudes of the same people, but next year. So do actually the attitudes of people that have been exposed to these small boats arrivals change not only to like this year, but also the next year. So maybe it also would try help you separate the salience versus the belief updating. Maybe people are not just sensitive to today's news, but it actually affects their views towards migration overall. So that would be also, I guess, a very interesting comparison. And especially if you have this data, it's very simple to do. Yeah, and then a couple of minor points. So you do mention that this news received quite a large number of media attention, and I would maybe try to, with the Google Trends, show that, like what's the share of news that are about the small boat arrivals compared to the migrant flows in general. That would strengthen your argument indeed that there are not so many migrants that arrive over this boat, but they receive so much attention. And also, I guess you have actually a very nice methodological contribution that you do not mention. So since you exploit that even within a wave, people are exposed to different sets of news. Actually, that has also implications for how other people use these surveys. Because usually when people look at a survey, we treat everyone who was interviewed in a given year or in a given year as an equal entity. But actually, people even on multiple days, as you show, can be exposed to different news. And that's why, to what extent then the results from these surveys using 1 year of the data can be informative, but actually also very interesting to think about it. So it's actually also a very good methodological contribution. Okay, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you so much. Really nice really nice comments. I think they can really help me better this paper. Just one thing about the share of migrants. I think we do mention it. We do show a appendix table for the share of migrant related news that mention migrants as well as non or just immigration related news as well. Rest, I think, yeah, very valid comments. I will. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask like two things. So the first thing is, first of all, can you maybe think, or do you believe that maybe the effect of the boats might be stronger in regions where you have actually more of the migrants already? Like, could there be some heterogeneity in places that have a lot of Syrians, a lot of Afghans around the time, maybe by this kind of salience effect? Could just be interesting in terms of mechanism. And the other thing is about the news outlets.
Yeah.
So what you do is you do topic modeling, right? You do some simple LDA and then you interpret the topics yourself. It's like you get
Yeah.
some word clouds, you interpret the topics yourself. There are also other ways how to do it. Instead of maybe you doing LDA, you could use maybe bird topic models, like the bird topic, you write like this. But what you can also actually do within these topic clusters that you have, right? You can measure how maybe shortly before the event and shortly after the event, maybe some kind of extremeness changes. Like before, like hmm, let me just quickly think. So sorry. So, but what you could maybe do is to measure the extremeness within topics.
Extremeness and
Like compare these kind of topics over time. Or
oh,
you can predict the topic for a newspaper, right?
okay.
And then classify it.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Okay. So what you do is you take a newspaper, right? Or like an online newspaper, and you do topic modeling on that thing. And then you get a predicted topic or like some predicted topics with a certain probability.
Okay. Okay.
That's what you do so far, right?
No. So these are news articles that have already been published, that have already been reported.
Okay.
So we just use topic modeling on the reported events.
Okay. Okay, fine.
So
But you could still try maybe to measure from the predicted topics how extreme the content or how extreme it becomes or how extreme it is relatively. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Got it.
I don't think I completely understood your second point though. So you're saying maybe I could predict the topics that the media outlets would report?
No, so you already do that, right? You already run LDA on these kind of things.
Yes, we already run LDA on the reported events.
Exactly. And then you get from all of the like you train the model, right? You train the LDA, and
Yeah.
then you predict the topics for all of the news,
Yeah, that's right.
right? And so you have in the end that a newspaper article has with a certain probability has a topic,
Yes.
right? And then you take events, maybe, I don't know, take just any of these category and predict predict the most probable category, right?
Okay.
And within that, you could measure extremism.
Okay. 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 Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. I got that. Okay. Yes. So heterogeneity by region. I think that is also a good point. But the thing that we are trying to show is that um the entirety of UK face the same number of migrant arrivals because the media is reporting. So the heterogeneity lies between how the media is reporting these events, but the entire country faces the same treatment with the number of migrants arriving is the same in a day for each region. Does that make sense? Um, so our treatment is similar across the UK. What varies is how media outlets are reporting these events. If I correctly, if
With the science was related to the outcome variable, so where the survey respondents sit. And I just thought to myself, okay, maybe when you have the effects could be differently in magnitude when you live in a place where already a lot of Afghans are living,
okay, okay,
because you might think differently about this boat impacts.
right, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. I could do that.
If there are any other questions from the attendees, please raise your hand.